business owners, get an edge over
Good
your
afternoon,
competition
ladies and
by
gentlemen.
ensuring that you have a valid and
Good afternoon, everyone. May I call this session to order?
So in climate change.
Climate change. So
That was vice versa. In fact, Baruda will follow. Can you announce where climate change should come back? Because
okay, climate change should come back. Hello, good afternoon. So there's a notification that I'm just receiving that in fact this session is supposed to be that of climate change. So those who had left, could you kindly come back, and if anything, those that are not supposed to be here go to, which ones are we saying, in which rooms? Let's wait for a further explanation from Dr. Mtetra. Okay, so could we kindly settle down as we are on the verge of tacking on the session to its final conclusion? So my introduction has already been done by Dr. Mtetra. I'm not going to waste more of our time because today our day is so short. So of the presenters that I've got in this session, okay, people are still trickling in. Okay, let's give them a chance to settle down. Okay, I can observe that everyone is settled down now. So for purposes of this session, I'm just going to be your chairperson. I'm going to be the driver of this session. So without wasting much of our time, today we have got presenters from NASA. Sorry, we have got presenters from, there's a Sheikh officer from McDonald Briggs, Bulawayo, by the name Mrs. Nikiwe Chinoi. Could we kindly have her forward as one of the first presenters of this session? A round of applause as she comes forward. Okay, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Is it? Afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, everyone. I'm sure we have seen the effects of climate change. We've been going up and down, up and down. It's part of the effects, right? So I'll be taking you through the knowledge and practices of climate change, looking at brick manufacturing, which is McDonald bricks. Can you please beam? While we are still waiting, I will go through. So climate change has been a global issue which has been affecting us for the past decades. Some scholars, for instance, we have got Gordon Moyo, who describes climate change as a phenomenon which is caused by anthropogenic processes, which include the burning of fossil fuel that we do, including coal, the burning of fuel when we are driving our cars. We also cut down trees, which is part of destroying the carbon sinks, which are responsible for collecting all the greenhouse gases that we emit. So greenhouse gases, in a nutshell, can also be described as a global dynamics, where we are saying that the global north countries, which are the mostly developed countries, are the ones who are responsible for the effects of climate change. They are the ones who are more economically developed. They've got these superstructures that they've built, and they are the ones who are polluting the most. Whilst us, the global south countries, we are the most vulnerable ones, and we are the ones who are facing the effects of climate change mostly. Are we beaming? So, with that said, a brick manufacturing is also part of those companies which are emitting and suffering the effects of climate change the most. So I'll take you through the brick manufacturing process. The first process is the clay preparation. The clay preparation involves mining and crushing. So the mining, we are mining clay from the mining claims that we have, which is mined using equipment such as the excavators, the tippers to carry the mined clay, and the forklifts and such. So from the mining process, the clay that is mined is then stored in pillars, where we call them the silos of the clay. There they undergo the processes of weathering. They are breaking down into smaller particles before they are then taken to the crushing process. Our crushing process involves the jaw crusher, where the big boulders are crushed into smaller particles. Then from the jaw crusher, they move to the vertical hammer mill. In the vertical hammer mill, the particles, they are then furtherly crushed into smaller particles. The transfer is done using the conveyor system. Then from the vertical hammer mill, the clay products are then stored in silos. While it's in silos, they go through another process of breaking down into fine clay. From the fine clay process, there is then the green brick. Under the green brick, we will see that there is first the mixing of the clay, then we mix with coal. Next. Next slide. Next. All right, I'll continue while they are sorting out. So during the mixing, we mix the clay, the coal fines, and water. They go through the extruder, where bricks are extruded from 8,000 to 14,000 bricks per hour, depending on the servicing of the extrusion machine. From the extruder, the bricks are then taken through the process of cutting. During the cutting process, we are shaping up the brick to form the face bricks that we see, the double bricks that we see. During the formation of the bricks, we do not determine the color. The color is determined during the firing process. So here we're just cutting the bricks and shaping them up. From the cutting process, we then shift to the dryer. Here, the moisture in the bricks is then taken out. It's sucked up out of the bricks. The drying process involves heat, which is collected from the kilns, and then it is used to dry up the bricks. The dried up bricks are then taken further to the setting where we are then packing the kilns that we use to fire the bricks. At McDonald Bricks, they use 3 forms of firing. The first one is the TVA kiln, which stands for transverse kiln. The second kiln is the DDK, which is the downdraft kiln. And then the third one is the Wolfman kiln. So during the firing process, the bricks are fired to 1,000 to 1,000.4 degrees Celsius, depending on the type of brick that you want to fire. So the bricks that we have, they include the face bricks, which are the heather blue, the Smith Bringo, the light Bringo, and the red rustics. Then we have got the other bricks, which are the super bricks, which includes the load-bearing bricks, the industrial bricks. And then we have got these other partially bent bricks, which we refer to them as the common bricks and the semi-common bricks. These are partially bent. They are usually at the end of the kiln during the process of firing. So I did a study at McDonald Bricks to find out the effects of climate change and to find out if the employees at McDonald Bricks really do understand what climate change is. And from the study that I did, I included both the top management, because they are the ones who have the detailed information and the detailed strategy concerning the driving of the company. Then I also involved the supervisors, who are the people who are always on the ground, and I also involved the shop floor employees, who are the ones who are exposed to the effects of climate change. So generally, McDonald Bricks employs 540 at max, to 400 when the production is low. Our production is usually low during the wet seasons. We are not drying any bricks, we are not making any bricks, we are just selling the bricks and offloading the bricks. So during that process, I issued out questionnaires to the employees, which was both in Ndebele and in English, because majority of them, they speak Ndebele. Then we have got some who come from the side who speak Tonga and Nyanja. So after issuing the questionnaires, I then went on to the management, the top management. I did an interview study with them. Next slide. So that's the study design and the target population that I was talking about. Next slide. Those are the data collection methods that I used, the questionnaire as well as the interviews. Let's move on to the results. Right, these are the demographic results, where I looked at the levels of education, the years of experience, the years that they spent working at McDonald Bricks. We realized that most of the employees at McDonald Bricks are the young folks from 21 to 40 years. Those are the ones which are there the most. Then, in terms of their levels of education, most of them, they ended at secondary level. And then years of experience, the highest one, it's 6 to 10 years. That's the most years that they've spent. Next. Right. Then there was a question to do with the knowledge on climate change. So from the study, 60% of the employees showed that they have got knowledge of what climate change is. Of that 60%, it is mostly the 21 to 40 years who are well versed. They have got exposure to social media, to the news, etc., etc. That's where they get their knowledge on climate change. But their knowledge on climate change is not mostly including the work that they work in. It's the general knowledge of what climate change is, but they couldn't link it to what is happening at work. They couldn't link to the question, is climate change affecting us at work? They just looked at climate change at a nutshell to say, yes, we do have knowledge on what climate change is, but we are not so well versed to what climate change means whilst we are at work. Next slide. Then attitude on climate change. They viewed, yes, they've got an appreciation what climate change is, but they are saying that it's somewhere far-fetched. It's not so close to us. It's not so close to what we do at work, because they raised issues to do with that we are always outside, because brick manufacturing is an outdoor work environment. They raised issues to do with we are always outside, we are always packing bricks, we are those who palletize bricks, we are always exposed to the sun. So it has nothing to do with climate change. It has something to do with the work environment that we are at. They also talked about issues to do with fatigue, because an employee is supposed to hold or palletize a range of 5,000 bricks to 4,000 bricks a day. So they raised issues to do with fatigue, a lot of handling of bricks, moving up and down, depending on the workstation that they are at. So they highlighted that most of the hazards that they have is heat stress, because since I highlighted that we burn our bricks using coal, when you move closer to the kilns, the temperatures, they are extremely high. So that on its own is a major high-risk area. You are not supposed to walk through there unless you are authorized, and they have got time seasons where they are supposed to move through. To measure, just so you know, to measure the kiln temperatures, we use a thermocouple, which is an infrared, so you can test it from a further distance. You don't need to be super close to where the bricks is being fired. Next slide. So I then asked the major hazards and risks that are associated with climate change. So 25% of the participants agree that climate change will result in increase in the exposure of levels of heat, exposure to direct sun, floods, and dust. Dust is mostly seen during the crushing process, because there's a lot of crushing that involves. But then the company has employed PPE to help reduce the dust which is emitted. This includes the provision of respirators, the dust suppression mechanism, which is done 3 to 4 times a day, depending on the natural weather as well, because on windy days, there is more dust, so we need to water down more frequently. Then on practice in control, these are the control measures which the management has put in place. Most of the employees felt that the existing controls that are in place to manage the aspect of heat, weather condition, dust, and fatigue were not bad and need not to be improved. We also need to take into consideration that this one is the 20 to 40-year-old. We are not that keen about climate change. We are still seeing it at a far-fetched view. And also their levels of education will also bring into the factor how much they view the controls that are put in place. However, for the interview side of it, the management, can you move on? The management highlighted that there is a great concern to do with climate change, and they are not sure if they are meeting the required needs to deal with climate change. Despite providing PPE, despite having workshops and other control measures that they have put in place, they are not satisfied. They think that the effects of climate change, they're going to go on further. They think that the effects of climate change are going to affect the brick manufacturing process. And as you all know, the more you are exposed to the sun, which is the brick manufacturing, the more you will start to develop this heat rash, the heat stress, the heat stroke conditions. So with more exposure, it's now raising eyebrows to the top management to say, is it enough what we are doing? And from the interviews that I conducted, they highly stated that it's not enough. There is need for more actions to be put in place. There is need more funding to be available for them to be able to meet the effects of climate change and come up with the mitigation and adaptation measures. So there are scholars who then say, like Dejen et al. 2014, who say that there is no relationship between the effects of climate change and the age, which is still yet to be further discussed. And also, the risk perception about climate change and the impact on occupational health and safety show that most workers are aware of climate change, but they see the exposure as limited, like I highlighted before. So in general, the employees who participated in the study, they don't see the need to improve the current controls that the company has put in place. They feel that the management don't understand this climate change issue. It's not so big as how the top management are emphasizing to say, we need to come up with strategies, we need to come up with mitigation and adaptation measures to deal with climate change as a nation. So with that said, I think it's wise for us as safety practitioners to include the issues of climate change in our risk assessment, to include climate change during the toolbox talks that we do, because it's now a highly risk thing. It's highly affecting us as a nation. You can also look and tell that we have experienced the El Nino effect, which is something that we have never experienced. The drought is beyond explanation. We are experiencing conditions where we got days without water. It's a serious crisis. I'm sure if you go by the falls, you also know that the water levels have seriously decreased. I thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I just hope everyone has been taking note of any possible questions. We are going to provide for an opportunity for those questions to happen. So as the presenters come forward, I'm going to be requesting them to be seated by my side here so that we can have a distinct question session. So in the meantime, I hope that the next presenter was preparing before, unless if there are any other urgent questions that might be raised, could we kindly move on to invite the next presenter? So our next presenter, I assume, should be Chipo Ashley Mkoma. You? Welcome, ma'am. As she comes forward, could you kindly give her a round of applause? Thank you. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. As aforementioned, my name is Chipom Koma, and I'll be presenting to you on the OSH adaptation strategies to the impact of climate change within the energy sector in Zimbabwe. So yesterday I was having a conversation with someone that I met during lunch, and they asked me, they noticed my tag, they saw that I was a presenter, then they asked what I would be presenting on. So naturally I told them the topic, and then they said, I hope you mentioned this and that in your presentation. And you can go to the slide, sorry. And they said, I hope you mentioned this and this in your presentation. So the suggestion that they gave was very applicable to the topic, but it's something that I hadn't included. And it then made me realize that I needed to emphasize this point that the strategies that they were mentioning were actually mitigation strategies rather than adaptation strategies. So when it comes to tackling this problem of climate change, there are two measures that are employed, which are the mitigation strategies and the adaptation strategies. So the mitigation measures are those actions that are taken to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, while the adaptation measures reduce the vulnerability to the effects of climate change. So for example, if you look at the picture on your left, you can see that the workers there in the background, there are some different elements that are highlighted. You can see there's, on the top corner there's lightning. You can see there's also the heat, high temperatures due to heat waves. We also have things like veld fires occurring. We also have an increase in vector-borne diseases. I hope you can see the little mosquitoes there. These are things that workers are exposed to, especially in the study area, Wange, where we know it's very hot and these things are likely to happen. So if not properly managed, climate change can result in risks and accidents and even deaths. So we really need to look into the adaptation strategy so that as the workers are working in this environment, they're able to adapt and perform their duties effectively. So moving on to the methodology that was employed, we did a climate risk assessment and also did a heat stress risk assessment, and a survey was done. Sorry, you can click so that... So the climate risk assessment was done using a software called HotHabSoft, which enabled us to trend data. So 40 years of temperature data from 1980 to 2023 was done for Wange as well as for Zimbabwe as a whole. And we also then did a thermal risk assessment using a basic risk assessment tool, which was developed by the Australian Institute of Occupational Hygienists. So this assessment measured how exposed different groups within the energy sector are. And then further to that, in order to gain insights, we then did a questionnaire so that we could understand the symptoms that different employees within the energy sector were facing. So moving on to the climate risk assessment. As you can see from the graph, it shows an upward trend. So from 1980 to 2020, for Zimbabwe, which is the first one that you see, there's been an upward trend in temperatures. Temperatures have been increasing. I'm sure all of you can attest that the temperatures are rising. But it's even worse in the area of Wange, where we, most of the energy sector, particularly power generation, are concentrated, where the temperatures, they actually range from about 30 to 33 degrees Celsius. And because of these increase in temperatures, it results in a lot of unsafe working days. So as you can see from the graph, the bars, they represent different groups. So I hope you can see the key. But you can see that for Wange high-intensity workers, the number of unsafe working days is really high. It's actually showing an upward trend into the future. We can see at around, if nothing happens, if we do not adapt, we will not be having people working safely, because most of the month, 25 to 30 days a month will be considered unsafe working days. And additionally, productivity losses are also projected to escalate significantly across all time periods, particularly for the high-intensity workers who may experience about 5.73 loss in productivity per month in the late century. So these findings, they actually underscore the growing threat to heat stress on worker safety in Zimbabwe's energy sector. So next, we then did the thermal risk assessment. As you can see, there are a lot of red bars. A lot of people, when they see red on charts, they know it's not a good sign. So this was to see how different employees within the power station are affected by heat stress. It's only the people who work in the main lab and the office workers and the engineering who are safe. But we can see people from main operations, the water treatment plant, mechanical department, electrical, they are all at risk to the effect of heat stress. So these results, they actually align with numerous studies that documented that various levels of heat stress among different worker groups are present. Therefore, there is a need to then have tailored interventions based on the job functions and environmental conditions. So for the survey, we asked different questions to different groups. The first question was a basic one. Do you know anything about climate change? And the response was actually similar to the previous speaker, where a lot of people did say yes, they know something, but was it related to their work environment? We then went on to ask if they have had any training on adaptation strategies for the risks that we had asked them about, and most of them said no, they didn't have any training on the adaptation strategies. And then sorry, please go back. We then asked for those who had received some form of training. We did ask what type of training they received. Most of them mentioned that they did have some form of training during induction, and others had on-the-job training. So this at least is a sign of hope that at least training is being done, though of course improvements are recommended. So we then looked at the current risks and symptoms that I experienced. Here an interesting trend was observed. For the risks, most of them, 31% highlighted having to experience poor air quality, and 28 highlighted experiencing excessive heat. But then when we then asked about the symptoms, most of the people said they experienced symptoms which include headaches, sweating, and fatigue, of which we all know these are then associated with excessive heat. So then my colleague and I then asked ourselves, why is it that we're not seeing a lot of people complaining of maybe respiratory or breathing problems? Why is the heat element higher? But then we noticed, okay, the environment that we're in, there are other processes that occur in the region of Hwange and even in the power station, which then generate some pollutants. And that is why a lot of people then view that as a symptom, as a risk that they're exposed to. So then this study then focused more on the excessive heat aspect, because the symptoms of excessive heat are what they experienced. So we then went on to ask about the measures in place. What measures do they think they have within their different work areas? A number of people did mention toolbox talks and trainings on OSH climate-related risks, and also basic risk assessments, as well as having regular hydration points. But of course, all of these can be improved. Next slide, please. So then we identified the gaps that you can see. Training and awareness, there was a big gap on training and awareness. There was also a moderate gap on health and safety equipment, and as well as emergency response preparedness. So moving on to the adaptation strategies. So first we'll look at the engineering controls. When it comes to training and awareness, it is important please go, yes. So really one crucial strategy is to design early warning systems that can alert workers to the extreme weather conditions. And this proactive measure can actually help prevent heat-related illnesses before they occur. And even including climate data trends, such as the ones you saw from the Hot Apps application, it's important for people to know about these, because there are other indices that are actually provided on those softwares, which people can then use to measure how exposed they are to heat stress. The employer also has responsibilities. They need to develop comprehensive training programs and establish training calendars in order to ensure that all employees receive timely and relevant information about climate risks. And they need to also encourage participation in training programs. And they also need to then make sure that they improve accessibility to the climate data so that everyone can stay informed about the potential risks and trends. And then the worker themselves, they need to make sure that they attend the trainings, because we do have situations sometimes where trainings are arranged, but then people maybe they prioritize other things. But it's important to attend these, and it's important then for workers to then change their behavior once they are aware. A lot of organizations nowadays are actually employing the behavior-based safety, and this is what we then advocate for. Once people are aware, once they are trained, they then need to change their behavior to align to what they have learned. And they also need to take an interest in climate data in order to understand the trends and to help them better protect themselves. So can we move to the next slide? So this slide is just a pictorial view of what we were talking about. As we can see, there are different detection and observation and analysis tools that the engineering side can employ. And we can see the workers, they need to participate in the trainings. And the employer can also motivate the employee to attend these trainings by actually providing things like certification. A lot of us appreciate when we receive a certificate, and many of us can then post, even on LinkedIn and things like that. But it actually aligns with the 7th Golden Rule of Vision Zero, because the 7th Golden Rule highlights that we need to invest in motivating the employee so that they participate in these awareness programs. We can move back, sorry, we can just move to the previous. Yes, so there's also the aspect of PPE. It's important now for the engineering side to design lightweight and comfortable PPE, which is also durable for the different tasks that they're involved in. For workers in the energy industry, most of them are actually exposed to medium voltage and high voltage equipment, and they need to be protected against those. But we notice that the current options that are available, they are quite heavy, they are quite bulky. I'm not sure if any of you have seen an arc flash suit. Most people wouldn't be very comfortable spending the whole day in that suit, but they have no choice because it protects them from that. So it's then important then to maybe devise some ways to then, make some PPE that is actually then a bit more comfortable and a bit suited for the high temperatures also that are available, since we mentioned, that temperatures are increasing. Then the employer obviously needs to then provide the PPE, and the employee needs to make sure that they wear their full PPE properly. Then cooling systems as well. We need to design, the engineering aspect needs to then design cooling systems that are efficient and that consume lower amounts of power while effectively keeping the work environment temperate. And the employers then need to provide funding for these cooling systems to be available, the air cons, the fans, so that whilst workers are resting, they are resting in a place where it's cool and they can be then refreshed, and when they go back for their work, they are less prone to suffering from heat stress. Can move on to the next slide. The next one, please. Thank you. So there's also the aspect of hydration. It's important for workers to remain hydrated and healthy. So it then necessitates the design of durable temperature-controlled hydration stations. And these stations should have multiple dispensing points to accommodate workers efficiently and they should also have clear signage so that workers know that this is where safe water to drink is available. And then there's an interesting point: intermittent breaks and rest and work cycles. This is something that the employer might initially cringe about. How many of you think that this is a good idea, having intermittent breaks and work rest cycles? You can show by raising your hands. How many of you think that having intermittent breaks and rest and work cycles is a good idea at work? Okay, I'm happy to see that the majority of you actually think that, because, well, without giving it much thought, you might think, oh, it's actually decreasing productivity. But it actually, in a heat-prone area, it can actually then increase your productivity, because you can have your work cycle in such a manner that most of the high-intensity work is done within the early hours of the day in the morning, and then people can rest maybe during lunch to about 3 or to about 2. Then later when it's cooler, they can then continue with high-intensity work, and that way they're able to actually perform better, because the environment is a bit more conducive than just working throughout at the same rate without resting and being exposed to such high temperatures. So there's also the need for health monitoring systems, because these can then help to measure key parameters such as the ambient air temperature, the humidity, the air quality, and UV radiation levels. Well, unfortunately in Zimbabwe, since we're a bit less developed, things like sunscreen, it might not be easy for the employer to regularly give like everyone sunscreen. But these are some things that, you know, can be employed as time goes on because of the rising temperatures and UV radiation levels that we're experiencing due to climate change. You can move on to the next one. So there's also the need, we've been talking about technology and mechanizing labor-intensive tasks. So it's important for the engineering aspect to make sure that they design and modify tools so that some tasks which are very labor-intensive can actually be done using machinery instead of having someone to do the task. At least it protects them from the effects of heat stress. It's then important then for the employer to make sure that they fund the provision of these tools, and the employee then needs to make use of the available tools. Well, unfortunately, in some cases, we may find people taking pride in doing, you know, hard labor by themselves, even when the tooling is there. You know, they'll be like, I want bus. But if the tools are there, people should make use of them, because it then protects them from the effects of heat stress. It's also important for risk assessments to be done, because we know the second golden rule of Vision Zero actually highlights the need to identify hazards and control the risks. So it's then important to make sure that risk assessments are done, and at least it then makes the employee know that the work that they're about to do might actually, it then makes them prepared for the work that they're about to do. They can protect themselves accordingly. So, you can move to the next slide. So, improving adaptive capacity and securing adequate funding are actually crucial for addressing the impacts of climate change. Training and awareness, as we noticed, can help employees and policymakers to understand the urgency of climate change and inform the planning process. And as we were mentioning that here we were focusing on adaptation. So mitigation efforts are actually essential, but adaptation measures are quite necessary in order to address some of these. And it's important for further research to be done through collaborations with research institutes in order to explore the innovation in climate resilient technologies and also to evaluate the effectiveness of adaptation strategies and conduct policy studies. So this research should also expand into other sectors which are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, such as the agriculture, the mining and construction. Can move to the next slide. You can click. So with the rise of the temperatures, we need to know that together we can beat the heat. So we need to be aware of the dangers of extreme heat. We need to then easily identify the symptoms. We need to act immediately, and we then need to take to a health facility if someone is suffering from the impacts of heat stress. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Another round of applause as she sits down. I'm lucky that all my presenters have been time conscious. By the way, we have got about 30 minutes to prepare before we leave for the boat cruise. So I just hope that the last presenter is just going to be good with time, just like predecessors have been. So my next presenter is going to be none other than Dr. Nyenda. Dr. Nyenda is the president of the Zimbabwe Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, ZIOSH. As he comes forward, could we present? And could we actually give him a round of applause? And I'm going to preempt, you know, this gentleman is one of my best presenters ever for the past 7 years. So I'm just hoping that time is not going to add to you, but good luck, my good brother.
Thank you. Okay. A very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ZIOSH, I would like to thank you for being the audience of this session today. Climate change is the subject that has been demystified already, and I don't think I'm going to do a lot of work in trying to socialize you into climate change. But it has been discussed traditionally in the context of the impact on food security, mainly, remember we are agrarian. But today we are bringing in a new dimension, which is the impact on the worker at the workplace. Climate change is all about long-term shifts in global and regional climate patterns, the drivers being anthropogenic activities, and we are actually the proponents of anthropogenic activities. It speaks, or it stems from the accumulation of greenhouse gases. Yes, we didn't want the chemistry of them, but we are actually being forced because of the impacts of climate change to like the chemistry of these gases, and it's happening over time. Let's go. The presentation outline, I am going to, in a nutshell, talk about trends and overview of climate change, and I'm happy the last presenter actually did something on that one, so I won't spend much time on the graphs. The main features of climate change affecting OHS. Yes, it is climate change the subject, but we need to have an understanding of the main features of climate change that are affecting the occupational health and safety. And we are going to talk about those impacts that are direct on OHS, or those that we get via the indirect effects. Some of the impacts are universal. We don't want to target a specific group of industrialists. It is one size affects all. But some of them are peculiar to different sectors, like we've just heard those who are in the energy sector. We're going to then say at the end of the day, what is that business must do in order to live with this seemingly inevitable climate change. So you can see that the global temperatures, average temperatures have been increasing over time. Let's go. It has been shown already. While precipitation has been fluctuating and it has been going up and below the normal. Both going up and going below the normal has occupational health and safety impacts. But perhaps before it does that, the impacts may be felt at business level or at core business level. So we'll talk about that. What are the main features of climate affecting OSH? They are mainly related to rainfall and temperature. The deviation of those from thresholds. I'm not going to talk about the effect of water as is usual, or the effect of temperature, for temperature is always there and consistently will always, even if it's zero, it's there. I'm going to talk about the effects of changes in these parameters. So with climate change, you find that there are a lot of abnormalities in terms of low rainfall, and normally we call them droughts. The rains are erratic in terms of how they come. They may not actually meet when we were actually expecting them. Where we have it in excess, sometimes we actually have some floods. And sometimes when it is coming, it comes violently in the form of lightning. And you notice that the OSH issues that come out of rainfall can be because the rainfall itself, which becomes the hazard because it's excess water. Then the shortage of it again can then compromise our control measures, OSH control measures that are water-based. Talk of our dust suppression systems. Talk about the rehydration stations and rehydration programs that these people are exposed to in Asia. If they will only rehydrate if there is water to actually drink. So those are the effects. From a temperatures perspective, high temperatures are the aspects that can affect us: heat waves, strong winds, and again, the high temperatures themselves can be the hazard that is actually speaking to your skin. But the high temperature can actually go via your engineering control, and it affects the cooling systems. We will talk about that as we go if we have time. What are the main industrial beneficial water bodies that have been affected by climate change, or that continue to have the risk of being affected? We know water is ubiquitous, but it is not always there in the right quality for certain uses. We want it in certain forms. So not every source of water is the right source of water for industrial processes. So there are a number of water bodies that are affected, and we can get statistics elsewhere. The Kariba Dam, that is the hub of our hydropower generation. We know power is important in engineering controls in OSH. The Ngezi Dam, those who are in the Mondoro Ngezi area, who are in the, along the dike, who exploit platinum. The Dowendale one, Mazoe Dam, among other dams. If I've left yours, please, it is on ETC. On the rivers front, you find that Mazoe River, from where those in Mashona and Central are actually benefiting in mining, Runde, that benefits those who are in the in Zhishawane there, like the Ngezi as well, the Ngezi River, Mpure, Shangani, and the ETC. Let's go to the next slide. I think that is just a sorry graph to tell us the story of our Kariba Dam. I think you can see that we have been having a decline in water levels in terms of that graph. But even if we are not into graphics, I think what is happening in the statistics that we get on the ZPC websites will tell you that we have been degenerating mainly because of this. Let's go. But what are the universal OSH effects related to water? I may not finish them, counting them on the bullets of my one slide, neither can I finish counting them on the fingers of my two hands. I will have to borrow yours, but in the interest of 30 minutes, I have to summarize them. Flooding of workplaces, where we have excess water, where the previously unflooded workstations or work areas can now be having the risk of flooding. You know, where we have excess water, sometimes you compromise infrastructure, such as roads, and that can actually compromise emergency preparedness and the response. This doesn't spare you whether you are in town, you know how floods can do in town, even along the Bordeaux Road, even just after the State House going there. You find that even if you are in rural areas, again, you risk having bad roads and wide bridges, and when that will compromise that. Diseases that are related to floods, I think waterborne diseases can actually proliferate in the face of increased water levels that are related to floods. Then we also have compromised respiratory protection programs. I know in many industries we have respiratory protection programs that are water-based. I'm just trying to speak like an OHS guy, but we do a lot of dust laying, wet percussion drilling, we do a lot of sprinkling, water spraying at crushers on haulage roads, and a lot of those things. Where water is scarce, you would rather deploy it to your leaching tanks, to your flotation tanks, than to your haulage roads. Let's go. What are the universal OSH effects related to high temperatures? Heat itself is a hazard. My predecessor spoke a lot about it, but the heat will also affect the cooling systems. Those that do not necessarily, that just depend on power, and those that depend on cold water. Remember, in engineering, we have different cooling systems. Those that do not use water, but they want power to actually work. And those that depend on water, I can give you an example of the radiator of an excavator, the radiator of an LHD, the radiator of a dump truck. You find also that there are diseases that are like elevated temperatures. I think malaria is one of that. Where you used to say we are fine with malaria and we don't see it in your risk register, it may be possible that it is needed by the ethical auditor now, when the climate change actually has hit you. We know we use a lot of, we know chemicals are hazardous, but we can't avoid them because they are an inevitable consequence of our desire for human emancipation. We need the cyanide, the dangerous cyanide. We need those substances actually to aid our processes. But these sometimes are temperature sensitive. They are actually going to increase their volatility, and they can change from one state to the other. Where we thought we had the protections for solid matter, now it has volatilized. We now need to have controls for fumes and actually gases. But if we don't know the thresholds that we can actually make it be converted from solid to fumes, we won't be able actually to cover that risk. There will be a lot of the breakdowns of water-dependent cooling systems. Let's go to the next. So what you are going to see from now onwards, obviously with the eye of wanting to save time, is now a movement onto the climate change impacts in mining. You will find that once we can talk about universal effects on OSH, but we also need to also give the narrative in different sectors. We need to have a sectorial approach much as we can come from the universal approach. So exploration and extraction, increased frequency of natural disasters as a result of that. You find that where you have floods and increased rainfall in certain areas, landslides become also very easy, the disruption of exploration and extraction operations. And that distraction sort of now puts us in a hurry. The next time we want now to do it after these things have gone off, you find that we may do it unsafely. Rising temperatures affect equipment performance and worker health. Changing precipitation patterns, older groundwater levels, we affecting extraction methods and even safety. We don't want to overemphasize the importance of groundwater levels, managing water levels in underground or in mining safety. I think they have a number of dewatering programs that are actually aimed at not only exposing the ore that they want, but it also makes sure that safety is assured. Imagine all those ropes that you use in hoisting there are immersed in water, how it can actually compromise the integrity of that. You need to go to Hagrandi every other week to actually ensure that you are safe, and you proved to the satisfaction of the chief inspector that you are still using safe ropes. Let's go to the next. Increased frequency of extreme weather events such as hurricanes will also disrupt haulage routes, much as also floods can do. And you find that when these conditions of the roads, I think in open cast and sometimes those that are in decline mines, where you risk to have floods and you find that your hauling becomes a problem. But because you are open for business, you are not open for OSH, sometimes managers, it's practical. They will push you to go and do it. And sometimes they're a contractor, you are paid by volumes. The tendency is you want to go to the pit, you risk getting to the slippery ramp actually so that you attract that dollar. So that's production pressure, which is actually a threat to OSH assurance, will actually urge you to do that. And the OSH risks are going to be extreme in the face of this. Let's go to another point so that I stay within time. Not only do we extract oil, we also then process it. We have refineries, we actually have smelting. Some of the processing that we have for the minerals that we mine, they are water-based. Increased temperature and humidity affect equipment performance. I'm not an engineer, I'm not going to expand much on it, and efficiency. The water scarcity impacts processing operations. If it is there, you won't have the water that you want. What then it means if you can't have spare water for other processes. Sometimes if you are managing toxicity by dilution, there are a number of people who say, no, this is so alkaline, this is so acidic. What I'm going to use is I'm going to dilute it using water because water is just by their doorstep. When it is not there, you are going to be affected. You find that heat stress is going to reduce the processing plant productivity, and you find that sometimes where you can have cycles of high humidity in the plant, you can actually subject it to corrosion. Where you have as the substance is now conveyed by pipes, you risk having a lot of people in processing plants now having some drips of cyanide, some drips of caustic, soda lines, and so forth, that actually will be hitting them. I like one thing that happens in mining is they try to, I think there was a presenter in the morning who was giving us GIS and mining tailings. You find that there are waste dumps that are sources of hazards and health risks. Dust that comes out of it, the water that seeps and that can actually be spreading around communities. These are, and these are usually rehabilitated, or these are designed in a manner that tries to minimize that. So extreme weather in the form of high rainfall and flash floods can actually cause the bursting of those storage ponds, the bursting of tailing storage facilities, affecting the workers in the vicinity and also those people who are actually around. And if you are safe today and you say, my catch dam is actually helping me, my return water pond is actually good to capacity, you need to be always on the weather forecast. Perhaps you are going to have flash floods that can actually overwhelm its capacity. Those who rehabilitate, they try to protect the slimes or the TSF workers and those communities that normally live around. if you look at it from most mines or in most areas, you find that community members do not want to live far away from mine tailings, despite awareness programs that you give them. Why? Because there is an economic pool to do that. If your security is half-baked, you find them trying to actually extract value out of your TSFs. But that also exposes them to risks, respiratory risks. It is going to be worsened in the face of climate change because rehabilitation efforts, you see a Freda Rebecca gold mine dump, very green, a Trojan mine dump, very, very green today. But when climate change comes, rehabilitation efforts are going to be very, very difficult because water is a determinant of plant growth. And these are the plants that are giving the cooling effect. They're also trapping the dust. So we are actually under fire because of that ease of erosion of the material that will result in the toxic substances also being released and water actually being also polluted. Let's go to the next. I think the risk of elevated temperature in the gas, I'm happy Mr. Nidela said 0 incidents, 0 explosions, even if a worker is working lonely across the whole world for 10 or even 11 or so years. I didn't know, I didn't hear how many years, but what I heard, they were above 10. So in the face of climate change, Mr. Nidela, there is a new risk where the elevated temperatures, the temperatures are going to change. They can actually also affect the stability of these gases, and we can have explosions, not only from them, but even from those who use it at very low level, the cylinders that we actually have in our storage facilities that we have at our workplaces. Let's go. In the energy sector, I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I think it has been looked at by my predecessor. But I think we need to understand that hydro and thermal power generation is water dependent. And I earlier on said, go to the website that speaks about how we are getting our generation. You find the hydro generation is close to 0, if not 0. It has actually declined because of issues of water. Then we know the industry requires water, not for OSH. It requires power, not only for OSH, but even for production. Now when the captains of industry open their thermal power stations, their industries, their mines, they want to produce, and when there's no power, it means they won't produce. It means they won't make money. What if they don't make money? I think Farai was talking about businessizing our arguments. Financializing our arguments. If they don't make money, obviously they won't have that money that they will actually need to allocate to the several needs that we have. And we must also, as professionals, acknowledge that sometimes the traditional way of business is like that OSH is viewed as a peripheral thing, isn't it? So what do you do if you're a normal business proponent? You are going to rob Peter to pay John. And Peter is OSH, and John is production. So what then happens is we need to understand that as a business, it's a risk. So what do we do now that we know power, that will be there, will be scarcity, and where we get it, we will allocate it to business, or the money that we get out of our business, we'll allocate it to the core issues. We need actually to look at that and see how OSH is going to be impacted and try to come up with adaptation measures. I think in trying to adapt, we have come up with solar plants. I can see solar roofs. I think there was a presenter who said we have a solar roof that is doing 1 megawatt, and they are en route of making it 1.2. And we have quite a lot of them. So you find that there are a number of things. These are going to be affected by strong winds because infrastructure can actually be damaged. And what we thought was actually a survival solution is actually to be even affected by this. The transmission, those who generate may have generated in surplus, but the transmission is actually going to be affected. And hence our control measures that are dependent on energy and this transmission in terms of OSH are going to be affected. Let's go. I think I can go on and give examples about that energy storage and backup systems can actually be affected, increase the risk of fire where we have batteries, and even the backup systems like the generators, they are sensitive to the temperature that we have. Remember, we also wanted to enclose them for security reasons for one way or the other, but at the same time, there is also this ventilation issue that is going to be affected, and the performance can actually be affected. But who is much at risk, for example, in that perspective where power-dependent equipment has to be repaired? You find today your risk register says the electrical technician, their high risk is electricity. If they are going to their OSH risk is electricity, electrocution, shocks, and so forth. But where we have power cuts, where we have high equipment breakdowns, these technicians are going to be deployed more than we were deploying them. So the higher the exposure, the higher sometimes the risk. We may need to revise our risk registers because the technician used to say, I am in green zone. Now he is getting yellow. Probably 5 years later, they're actually getting into the red zone. These technicians, I am just going even to touch on IT. That is usually sort of very safe. What can happen with the servers? The servers are under threat. When they are elevated temperatures, they are going to be getting there, wanting to repair them in heat-laden environments. And you find the risks associated with that, and even data issues. They come also from a business standpoint. Let's go. And I can't overemphasize our farmers in Chile there, Mr. Ndlovu, Mr. Moshiwa. You find that they are outdoor workers. They are actually going to be affected by the heat itself. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, heat stroke can actually affect them. But at the same time, you find that the pesticides that they use, some of them can actually increase their volatility. And when they are used to the general management in cold weather, in moderate weather of management of chemicals, you risk it has actually shot you have sprayed yourself in the eye. And it then means the awareness programs that my sister was talking about needs to be intensified. Where in the few in the few agricultural environments like Tongat, where you have dust suppression happening, where there is lack of water, obviously you deploy the water to the furrows or to the sprinklers, to the center pivots, rather than deploying it to all those farm roads, whether it is in Wenezi or it is in another estate. Let's go. And if you have poor yields, it means you don't have good budgets for OSH. I think that's the same with flooding, where you are navigating your fields. You have a lot of risks associated with the navigation by workers. And I think the snakes as well, they can actually, the risk of snakes becomes very, very high in those fields because of the equatorial rainforest that would actually be made. Let's go. Then the healthcare. Normally we can mess around banking on the fact that there is somebody who is in the curative side of OSH or even primary health who will help us. That's how we can choose to be careless or even not to worry. But what is going to happen in the face of climate change is we will still have that one hospital that we have. We will still have that one clinic that we have at the hospital, at our workstation. We'll still have that one occupational nurse at our workstation. But now the illnesses that are coming out of it, they have actually increased. So you are going to have the health care, the health services, that's the 161 ones, Convention 161 ones, being overwhelmed. And this actually even subjects even these few workers to mental health issues. And mental health issues was actually a key issue, a key topic on this podium yesterday. Those health workers, again, who are here, you are going to be subjected into wanting to go and help people in the open. The paramedics there, they go and help people in the outdoor environments. They will also be subjected to risks that were not exposed to them some time back. Let's go. And you find that the construction industry is not spared again. They are outdoor workers. Their air quality is going to deteriorate. Why? Because we don't have dust suppression systems. Those who are in urban areas, We know it is paved. There is this concept in geography about the urban heat islands, where paved surfaces versus non-paved surfaces, you find that there is more, the temperatures in urban areas can be higher, or in locations that are more paved than those that have green belts, you find that there is a difference there. So that can actually affect outdoor workers. So probably as a way of trying to mitigate this, whilst paving is very, very crucial and it beautifies the area, we may want to balance paving in the interest of allowing seepage infiltration, and also in the context of allowing greening the environments, at least to reduce the urban island effect. And obviously make sure that respiratory protection is actually assured from making sure that we will have enough water for that. I think emergency response, I talked about it in the generic effects, but what do you do with an ambulance where somebody has been a powerful leg has been amputated by a 1-ton boulder that has fallen at level 6 underground? You depend on the road to get to he or she who can actually be able to save their life, isn't it? Yes, but you are faced with that was actually affected by the flash floods that will damage the roads. I'm not talking about potholes. I'm talking about the climate change induced potholes. So you find that this person sort of is more likely to suffer secondary injuries than the one that they had when they are actually affected during this. It's going to compromise that. It doesn't matter whether yours is the highest medical facility or ambulance, it can actually be affected. So if you had a Honda Fit as your ambulance, here perhaps you need a Land Cruiser for that. It means now if you had budgeted 6,000, perhaps you now need 90,000. It is speaking to us. Lest OSH will be compromised in the name that we have a Honda Fit masquerading as an ambulance in the face of climate change. I think some structures can collapse due to heavy hurricanes, strong winds, and those are safety matters. Buildings collapse. Some near Copacabana there, they collapsed. Increased risk of waterborne respiratory issues, mental health impacts from displacement. Where we have flash floods, people can actually be displaced. Where you fail to respond to an emergency, you are stuck. You have mental issues. You say, "Ndichapona rain ndataza cross a bridge," etc., etc. And you are down there in Maka, and you want to go to the avenues. It's going to be very difficult. Okay, let's go to the. Probably, I think that's the same in terms of transport. Let's go to the last one, the last Sundance we talked about. Let's go. Tourism again is going to be affected. We are in Victoria Falls, where we have guides and a lot of people actually getting into the forest. They're seeing the big five and stuff, identifying the wild animals, the wild plants, and so forth. That actually is going to be affected. I think this one I've spoken it from the general one. Can you go? Our equipments again, I talked about them. You can go. Power, the equipment, you can also go, but you can have spontaneous fires, high risk of spontaneous fires, especially in coal mines along conveyor belts. Is the thermal power stations, those who transport those from the mine to actually to the plant, and probably also a high risk of accumulation of methane and other explosive gases in coal and fiery mines, where you have elevated temperatures, and alongside having poor ventilation systems, because you won't be able to extract. We have a lot of gassing incidents that happen, and those are likely to be high. Our backup generators will be affected. Let's go. Right. So what is going to be there in the presentation that you get is not what I'm going to present now. You get a structured approach of the story in a tabular form. Just beam one, where you have climate change results, such as heat-related illnesses, the effects that will actually happen on the people, and examples that substantiate why we are saying it happens, and what will be the implication to the person and to the business itself. Go to the next. The same is with the respiratory diseases. The same is, let's go to the next. The same as floods, where toxic contaminants and so forth can mix with water and affect people. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next. I think that's a table. Now I want to end by getting to the last slide. Can you go to the last slide before I thank people? Yes. How business must prepare. Business must prepare now that it has headed from a specific heat stress climate vis-a-vis heat and this general approach that I actually took. Climate change must now be viewed as a key external issue in clause 4.1 of the ISO standards that we're talking about. I think that has been emphasized, and there has been a communique from that. Business must go and view it as an external issue, just like legislation, just like technology, just like anything that we're looking at, and say, I am in region 4, I'm in region 5, and it's going to be worse. No, I'm in region 1, I'm in region 2, that is better, but it's going to be like region 4. So if you said those who are at the colliery are doing it this way, we are spared because we are at Red Wing. It means you need now to copy and sort of paste, obviously modify what the colliery has been doing that is in an area that doesn't have water. Climate change sensitive risk assessments. I yesterday talked about probably the inadequacy of risk assessments. We are marshals of risk assessments as OSH professionals. It's so embarrassing to get the ethical auditor that Mr. Ntonono spoke about raising a non-conformity that says the risk register was inadequate. It was inadequate after this show, showing that it didn't have climate risk assessment dimensions. To the biological, the physical, chemical, whatever dimensions. We need to go and start doing climate risk assessments. Let us go and climate proof our OSH programs. Anything that you traditionally view as purely governance, purely economic, purely finance, purely engineering. Let's look at opportunities for putting grains of OHS in those programs. Remember, clause 6.6 2 talks about actions to achieve our OSH objectives. Then those who are in audits, please, don't audit like you are 100 years ago. Go audit with the reality that even at UN they had to sit down and to acknowledge that the climate change is in the house. Who are asked really to try and undo the global agenda. Let's go and improve our audits and make sure that the climate dimension is given emphasis. Those who are in investment, I noticed my colleague had a column on what the employer should do, and the employers are here represented. You need to invest in climate-proof equipment. By climate-proof equipment, it's like, we know there are brands. 3 quotations cheapest, but the other one may not be working well if it is exposed to adverse weather conditions. Let us not buy it for its price now, and we do not do our accounting well when the effect is transferred to the person. Then we need also to make sure that what we used to view as corporate social responsibility may no longer be CSR. You know, when a company drills a bore, it says we were doing it for the community, it is CSR. When they build a dam, they say it was CSR. But now it may not be CSR. We are building a dam that we need where our previous source or our current source will no longer give us the water. We are doing it so that we will draw water for our dust suppression systems. We need water to cool our systems. So there has to be a paradigm shift with regard to that. How do we sum up this? ESG, ESG, ESG. Sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yunenda. It's very unfortunate that you had to work under pressure because of the time constraints. But I would have hoped that had it been that another opportunity would be provided to you, so it be to enable everyone to be informed over the expertise that you share on the subject matter. So I just hope that everyone who might be desirous to ask some questions might have been recording their questions. And I just hope that those questions are going to be as brief as possible because we are now running out of time. So once perhaps your question is asked by another person, we wouldn't want a replication of the same question. Consider that question answered. So are we going to have any questions to our presenters who are here with me? I'm giving that time to everyone. Yes, ma'am.
When you highlighted the issues of adaptation, so climate change adaptations are kind of long-term. So in your context of study, you would highlight to say maybe early detection systems, that's an adaptation system. So the issues that we are highlighting, there are more mitigation, more prevention to say, now that the worker is exposed, what do we need to do? But in adaptation initiatives is, what do we need to do so that to ensure that the worker is not exposed? So you were highlighting when a worker is already exposed, that's not an adaptation. We look at maybe remodeling or rechanging our infrastructure, our buildings to withstand the heat or to buff the heat so that it does not enter into where the worker is working, or in terms of Dr. Nyenda's presentation, you are buffering your equipment so that the heat does not affect the equipment that is cooling. So those are adaptation strategies, not the ones that you were highlighting. Thank you. They are more long-term and they need, capital in investments. Thanks. Okay.
Let's have more questions. Okay. Could we distribute the few mics that we have to all those that might be interested in asking questions? Could we just pass on them to all the people?
Okay, thank you. I want to ask about adaptation and mitigation. Do they work in isolation, or it's better to have a collaborative approach to manage climate change?
And that one is going to?
I'm sure anyone can take that up.
Okay. So let's actually be introducing ourselves as we ask the questions and our organizations from where we're coming.
My question goes to the brickmaker. I understand that you are aware of the fact that coal happens to be your major raw material, and it is also a major contributor to global warming and the climate change problem that we currently have. What plans do you have as a company to make sure that you eventually shift to environmentally friendly fuels so that you continue to burn up your bricks?
And that should be going to? Let's also indicate to whom the question is directed. It seems we no longer have any questions. So to you, our presenters, could you proceed to answer the question?
Thank you. I think adaptation and mitigation, they are separate, but we need we can go with them both. But first of all, mitigation, like I think the first presenter indicated when she was saying the recommendation that she got, she then tried to sort of politely define the difference between those. Mitigation, you are making sure that the emissions that actually cause the climate change are reduced. You are reducing emissions by first making sure that you may replace or reduce your fuel burning appliances or the fuel that you burn that will release, or you invest in that will clean, because we are taking the atmosphere as a bank where you are throwing and it's cumulative. But we also know that the physiology of plants is such that it also extracts. So you actually doing that. So mitigation is needed because it will continue reducing this magnitude of climate change, even if it is already happening. But adaptation becomes very, very important because sometimes we are already acknowledging that we were a bit late and we seem to continue to be late. Remember, climate change is premised on models that are projecting the societal behavior. If a society continues behaving like this is what will actually be like in terms of the society. So adaptation becomes key because there is a silent voice of conceding that climate change has gone out of hand. So hence we need to adapt. The idea in risk-based thinking, you are saying, am I much going to invest into adaptation or mitigation? It is your risk perception or your perception of the contribution to climate change. Most will agree that since it's global, we may not be contributing a lot to that, but we are affected a lot. And hence adaptation becomes the emphasis. I think that could be the basis why people are emphasizing on adaptation from an OSH front. And being SHEC practitioners, I would say those who have environmental persuasion, they will be the leads in mitigation. Those who are of an OSH perspective, when the environmentalists fail, we will be hit hard, we will adapt, isn't it? Yes, but both are important.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. To answer you, as a company, they have put up a solar structure, but it's still work in progress. They are working on it with a target to finish by December. But you also need to know that in order to transition to meet the COP21 of net zero, it would mean that the brick-making companies need to come together and sit and come up with strategies that they can put in place to say, we are eliminating coal as the main source of fuel and find other means of firing the bricks. It also needs companies to come up with a strategy which is more advanced, which involves a destruction of the kilns that we are using, because the kilns that we are using are specifically designed to burn using coal. So in order to shift to net zero, it would definitely need more people coming together, more than just one company to say we are totally shifting. It would need more companies to come together who are in the brick making to say this is the strategy that we are going to take in order to ensure that we meet with the COP21 demands. Thank you.
So I would presume that all the questions have been answered, unless if there are any further questions. Okay, there's a gentleman.
Thank you very much. I am Mr. Daga from ZPC Caribbean. I seem to realize that we are talking more of, we seem to be ignoring the issue of mitigation in its true sense, less than 5%. Let's say, from a theoretical point of view, we really do whatever is needed and strictly no pollution from Africa. So what? The situation will continue to be bad, or it will continue to worsen for that matter. So really there is a reason to put pressure to the polluters who are well known. Key among them, China and the United States of America, with all due respect. And it looks like we are quite on that, and it could treat our signs and symptoms, which is far from being enough. Then, secondly, PAMA controls, achona ataurwa iwayo, in terms of adaptation, I was expecting to see some kind of hierarchy there. We start with this, chikafela toenda oko, and so on. Kudzimara tashika ku PPE maybe, iri ku at the tail end of the controls. I think that is very important because more often than not, PPE is to really assist us in terms of damage control, but otherwise it's not preventive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm only left with. Want to say something? Okay, okay.
Okay, thank you, say, from ZPC for that note. I know we are arguing from not the political perspective for today, but I think we agree with you on that. We don't contribute a lot, hence we need to pinpoint those who are actually affecting us, being those global giants. But here we are arguing from an OSH perspective. We are saying whoever is the mother and father of the hazard, we are supposed to be prepared. Remember, in the ISO standards to which we are in a good number of organizations are certified to, in the requirements for risk assessment, hazard identification risk assessment, they say hazards created from outside the workplace that have the ability to affect the health and safety of workers. So you can view climate change events and its elements as hazards that have been created by China and America outside the workplace, but that has the potential to affect the health and safety of the workers. Then you start looking at them. In 4.1, you can view them as external issues that are coming from the economic giants or industrial giants, but that are hitting us. For sure, we have a duty in OHS to protect our workers, no matter the hazard is coming from. I will take you the example of the snake. The snake is not in anyone's warehouse, but it will affect your worker. So it is perhaps created by the parks who say don't kill it, but it will come and bite my worker. At least from an OHS perspective, let's not worry much about who has caused what, but what is that can harm my employee regardless of his ancestry or genealogy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyirenda. Yeah, I would want to think that indeed, issues of climate change are a problem, a global world problem. And as we speak, I think the Global North has been pushing for a program called the Just Transition, whereby we have to get to a point where we are only going to be using renewable energy and not any fossil fuels anymore. So the advantage that we have in the meantime, I think in the interest of business and in favor of those that are still desirous to invest in businesses like brick making, we still have got coal as a possible option that you might embark on. But the problem now is that you now have to plan ahead and get to know that once it's called a no and it's abolished, you should be able to, by then, transition to the renewable energies. You want to say something? Okay. Could you kindly hand over a mic to her?
I think I want to buttress what the previous gentleman just said, because I think the moment we accept that we as Africans actually have a stronger foothold in this conversation, it changes our negotiation point as far as, for example, climate change funding is concerned, because we are the least offenders. We should be able to go to a negotiation table. When we go to COP, the conversation we should be having is saying, listen, we have no problems. We've got the Congo basins that you were saying that are absorbing whatever we might be putting, including from our coal. So if we as Africa are united and agree that because we are not emitting carbons that are causing these problems, our response to the situation should be different. It shouldn't just be from a point where we're saying, well, listen, yes, indeed, it's unjust and we're going to bear the brunt. But I think we need to change that approach, and I think that was his point. Because if we are not offending, why are we always moving around as if, when really we should be going there and saying, listen, you sit down, you cause these problems, this is how we're going to fix it, rather than always waiting for the research that's coming from there to say coal is bad, 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 bad. But we are not having a problem with coal. It's them that is having a problem with that. So why are we having to change our systems just because someone who's made the mistake, when we in Africa, they say our basins are the lung of the world. So I agree with them. I'm just buttressing that point that I think we need to change our thinking as Africans, because in this case, we've got a much better negotiation place. Why are we not using it?
Thank you for that clarification. And the advantage that we have at present, and the prayer that we might also want to have in the interest of business, is that at least Donald Trump wins in America, because he's also overprotective of those mineral resources they have, the likes of oil, the likes of fossil fuels that are being complained of. In fact, there's a school of thought that there are other factors that are actually also causing the climate changes that we are talking of, and not necessarily fossil fuels and stuff. If you look at countries like Japan, I was there sometime. These people have actually used what they have, which are actually vehicles. You know that the motor industry, they are the giants in that area. They actually have got some power generation that is happening through vibration that is being caused by vehicles. Their vehicles, as they drive along their highways, they are actually generating energy as a result of that. So we can also then, as a way of mitigating whatever challenges we have in terms of climate change, apply those proposals that you think are actually workable with. So in the interest of time, I should be left with an option to just thank my presenters. Could you kindly give a huge, huge round of applause to thank my presenters? In terms of notices, we should have been by the foyer by 4 p.m. You know, us being Africans and it being difficult for us to really be adhering to time strictly, I think there has to be an adjustment. There's also provision for tea, afternoon tea for those that are good with that. But I think there is need for us to utilize the few minutes that we have to go and dress up for those that are actually embarking on sunset cruise, which is likely to be called anytime. So I think let's give ourselves up to 15 to 20 minutes to prepare for that. Thank you. I think we should call it a day on that note. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot something. There's a gentleman here called Clarence Mulambo. Is he by any chance here? There's a diary that has just been picked somewhere. I'll leave it here so that at least we can remind the next colleagues tomorrow to remind him to pick up the stuff. Thank you.
uzagara